Hello and welcome to MAQS in Fives. In this session, we'll be covering MAQS with SpecFlow. And before we go into any of the technical detail, I would like to direct your attention to this blog post, the world's most misunderstood collaboration tool. This post was written by one of the creators of Cucumber, and if you're getting into SpecFlow, Cucumber, any of this tooling, I strongly suggest you read this article. The creator does a really good job of kind of outlining the distinction between the processes that these tools were meant to help facilitate and the tooling itself, and how you really shouldn't conflate the two. So, with that being said, let's talk about what you'll need to have installed. Obviously, you'll need Visual Studio in order to do this type of testing, and you'll also almost certainly want the templates. So if you go to the Visual Studio Marketplace, you'll find the MAQS SpecFlow extension. This will have all of the templates for SpecFlow tests. And then optionally, you can also install the SpecFlow for Visual Studio extension. This just gives you extra IntelliSense and tooling inside of Visual Studio. I strongly recommend having this. That being said, if you don't, it's not absolutely required. Okay, so the tooling is installed. We've opened up a new copy of Visual Studio 2019, create a new project. And if we look at SpecFlow here, you'll note that we have our templates. You also note that we have Appium, Selenium, and Composite. So I'm assuming everybody knows what Appium and Selenium are. Composite, this is just a collection of all of our testing types. You also note that there is kind of the standard version. This is the VS test version and the NUnit versions. The key distinction here is the VS test versions cannot run tests in parallel. The NUnit ones can. This is a limitation of kind of SpecFlow itself. So just keep that in mind. So we will create a brand new composite project. One quick thing that we should look at before we actually get any further is we want to look at the SpecFlow settings. This is one of those gotchas that if you have this set incorrectly, things will break unexpectedly. The way that the code behind for feature files was generated has changed over time. The legacy doesn't quite match up with the new incarnation. So if you have that turned on, your tests will almost certainly fail. So make sure you turn that off. Okay, so let's look at feature files. And there's one key thing that I want to point out here. We have this tagging, so we know what type of test we're doing. So MAQS_Appium, MAQS_database, so on and so forth. Each of these types have their own tagging. And this is how MAQS knows what type of test you're running. So if you don't have this, your tests will not work as expected. So make sure that you have this. And we'll focus on the Selenium test for right now. So I assume that if you're watching this video, you're familiar with SpecFlow and or Cucumber, so I won't really go into much of that specific detail. But just note, I have my given then, and these will connect to my steps. And if I look at my steps, I have another thing that needs to be added. Actually, two things that need to be added. If I have a step, I have to make sure that that step has binding. I also want to make sure that that step has the right parent step type. So in this case, we're doing Selenium. So this is base Selenium test steps. If we go through, we saw I log in as I believe it was standard user, and the page is loaded. So pretty straightforward. This given links to this given, and then the then links to this then. One of the things that I would like to point out here is that we're actually saving off state data. So we've already created a home page. You'll see home page. So we could create a new copy of that later on, or we can save it off in our local scenario context. Note this local scenario context is thread safe, so we can have this as part of our parallel test if we're doing NUnit. But the way that we save off this data, actually we have two main ways. So you can save off this data as a specific object type. So let's say that you have, and this is really good if you have one copy of a specific object type, right? So in this case, maybe we only have one home page, so we wouldn't hold two of them. That being said, if you have two of the same type or more of the same type, you can put them in as a named resource. And then when you want to get them out, if it was just we set them as a single object type, we can pull them out as a single object type, or we can pull them out in a named fashion, kind of whatever works best for your usage. So now if we run this, we'll see our test run and mostly pass. While that's running, I would like to look in the app.config. And what you'll note here is this is the same app.config that you would see for your normal MAQS test. So all of the same settings that we have for what kind of settings do we have for Magenic? Do we have logging? What are our logging levels? What are our Appium settings? So on and so forth. Exactly the same. The only real big difference here is we have some information around SpecFlow. That one line is basically the only difference. Now that if we look at our tests, we'll see that two failed. We have a Appium test here, and that Appium test should totally fail because we are pointing to Sauce Labs and we haven't put in real credentials. So expect that to fail. And then we have an email test here. The email test will throw an exception because it's pointing at a no such host. Because we don't have a standing email server for you to connect to, obviously. But that's it. You are ready to start creating your SpecFlow based tests leveraging MAQS. Thank you.